The second that he saw me, he tried to rush towards me in a fit of rage and was tasered and fell to the ground unconscious. At which point, the police handcuffed him and dragged him out to their squad car. Hi there, my name is Austin, and I'm 31 years old. These past 2 years have been very rough, and unfortunately, my brother-in-law hasn't made things any easier for me and my children. So it all started 2 years ago. My wife and I were on vacation when she fainted. At the time, we didn't think much about it and just figured that it happened because of heat exhaustion. But once we returned home, it began to happen more frequently. Concerned what it could mean, she went to see a doctor about it and found out that she had terminal brain cancer, and within a few months, she was in palliative care. Seeing how quickly it spread terrified me, but not nearly as much as her death. It was so hard on me and our 2 children. None of us were ready to let her go, but we didn't have a choice. Being the owner of a restaurant didn't help much either, as I was constantly bombarded with work and could barely make time to help my children work through this new and scary life that we were forced into. My son and daughter were not coping very well with things. They were very young, so I fully understood that it was very hard for them to understand how to process their mother's death. I tried my best to comfort them, but it was incredibly hard. I did get them a therapist, but even that wasn't enough. My in-laws reached out to me and offered for me to temporarily move in with them. They saw firsthand that my children were struggling, and they loved them greatly and wanted to help. I was reluctant at first, as I really didn't want to leave my home. After all, it was the one place where I felt closest to my wife, but I also knew that I needed the help, and so I moved into their home. It was a bit awkward, but I did get along quite well with both of my in-laws, especially my father-in-law, as he owned a restaurant as well. His was smaller than the one that I owned, but it was far more popular, and he did quite well for himself. We would often sit and talk about strategies to improve our businesses together. It didn't take long for me to begin noticing a positive change in my children. Time with their grandparents was doing wonders for them. Between spending time with me, therapy, and playing with their grandparents, they were finally able to act like themselves again. Around the 2nd month, though, is when things began to take an odd turn. My brother-in-law, Greg, began acting odd and asking strange questions.
So, Austin, how long are you going to stay with my parents?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Being here has really helped me and my kids, but it isn't going to be a permanent solution.
Sure it isn't. Just don't get any ideas about staying long-term or trying to weasel your way into our restaurant.
I had no idea where this came from. Greg co-owned the restaurant that his father had started, and I knew that in the past that it bothered him when I would talk to his father about how to run a business. But I had no idea that he thought that I was trying to steal his business away from him. I tried to help him understand that I was in no way trying to usurp him. Greg, I love your family, and your restaurant is an amazing place, but I have more than I can handle with my own business. I have no interest in trying to take yours away from you. Honestly, I'm just living here so that I can help my kids through this very challenging time. The loss of your sister hit us hard, and we're just trying to work through it, and living with your parents has helped us do that. I had told him the truth, but Greg was not convinced, and he stormed off in a huff. It was clear that he wasn't believing me, although I really didn't understand what had motivated him to think that I was trying to steal his family's business from him. It felt like he was unhinged and was seeing an enemy where there wasn't one. The next day, though, things took a bit of a turn. My father-in-law approached me and the conversation was quite uncomfortable.
Hey, Austin. So I was just wondering how business is doing.
It's okay. I've had a hard time concentrating on work since my wife passed away, but I have a great staff, and they are doing a wonderful job at keeping things flowing well.
That's good to hear. I spoke to Greg, and he had made it sound like your restaurant was about to close up shop. He made it sound like you were struggling financially.
Where did he get that idea from? But no, things are difficult right now, but the business is doing well.
Glad to hear it, but should things become difficult, you can tell me. You're still family, and there is always a place for you here in my home and at my restaurant if you desire.
I truly do appreciate that, but I can honestly say that Greg doesn't. He already thinks that I'm trying to take the restaurant away from him. Just then, Greg walked in, and it was clear that he had just heard everything that we had just said to one another.
I knew it! I knew that you were trying to weasel your way into the business. You can't take it away from me.
Before anyone could stop him, he ran at me and punched me as hard as he could. The two of us collapsed to the ground and he tried to keep punching me while I defended myself. My father-in-law quickly grabbed him and dragged him off of me.
Greg, what the hell do you think that you are doing? Get off of him! I knew that you loved him more than you loved me. Well, fine. Austin, I'll make you pay for driving a wedge between my family and I.
And then he stormed off. Thankfully, I wasn't hurt too badly and just had a black eye. I could have pressed charges against him, but I chose not to. However, neither my father-in-law or I could have guessed what Greg was going to do next. Several hours after he attacked me, I was getting ready for bed when the security company that monitored my restaurant sent me an alarm that someone had broken into the building. They had called the police, and they were on their way there. Terrified that my restaurant was being robbed, I got dressed and headed over to see what was going on. When I arrived, I saw that the front window of my restaurant had been shattered, and police were inside struggling to get someone under control. As I looked around, I saw that the fire department was also present, and there were several firefighters inside as well. Panic gripped my insides as I went in to find out what had happened. Inside, the scene was absolute chaos. There were tables tipped over everywhere, and Greg was there and fighting with police officers. He had assaulted an officer while they had tried to restrain him, and two had taser guns pointed at him and were threatening to shoot him if he didn't comply with their demands. The second that he saw me, he tried to rush towards me in a fit of rage and was tasered and fell to the ground unconscious. At which point, the police handcuffed him and dragged him out to their squad car. I was in a state of shock when a firefighter came over to me.
Sir, are you the owner of this restaurant?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Well, sir, we arrived in time to put the fire out before it could do any serious damage, but you will need to replace all of your table coverings as they are ruined.
I found out later that apparently, Greg had broken into my restaurant and had doused all of the tablecloths in the dining area with lighter fluid and had lit a couple of them on fire. Since the security company was monitoring my restaurant, they notified both the police and the fire department of what was going on, and they saved my restaurant before any permanent damage could be done. I was beyond shocked. In the months that followed, Greg was charged with breaking and entering, destruction of private property, and arson. No one could understand why he had behaved the way that he did, but he was deemed fit to stand trial and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Both my in-laws and myself suspected that Greg had gone crazy after his sister had died, and rather than go to therapy, he had turned to drugs, which made him paranoid and unhinged. Part of me thinks that he shouldn't have gone to prison and had received mental health help. But it wasn't up to me. The sad part is that with him in prison, his father was forced to ask me to help him with their restaurant and has since made me a co-owner. I, of course, made him a co-owner of my own restaurant, though as well as a show of good faith. But with our combined efforts, we have been able to run both businesses quite well, and both are doing better than they have ever done before. I did move back home, but my children and I do visit my in-laws at least a few times a week. It is beneficial to all of us, especially since my wife is gone and Greg is in prison. They need our help and support just as much as we need theirs. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. So I imagine that's why my in-laws decided to employ even more drastic measures. 1 month after that incident, I closed from work one day, and I was cornered by a thug in the parking lot and was severely beaten, resulting in a black eye. I knew they had sent him because the individual, just before proceeding with the beating, specified it to me. If I didn't distance myself from Kyla willingly, it was going to have to be forcibly. That must have been the thought process my in-laws went through, which led them to hire this person's services. My name is Hunter Biden. I never thought that in this century and country, I could be a victim of such blatant discrimination because of my skin color. But then again, one doesn't usually think that those things that happen on the news could happen to them. For my part, I must say that everything started well, and without any red flags on the horizon. I was in my 30s, and had recently started dating a girl named Kyla, whom I met at the gym. Kayla was always very affectionate and friendly with me, from the first time we went out on a date, and she didn't seem to have any problem with the fact that I was black and working class, while she was white and, as she made me understand, belonged to a wealthy family. Kyla never wanted her background to intimidate me. In fact, she had an accommodating and fairly modest personality. She had everything: a family that loved her, a prestigious job at a famous law firm, and enough money to afford living in what I could only describe as a mansion in the heart of the city. But despite having so much, she never reproached me for earning less or for not being as sophisticated as her. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but we were both very comfortable in it, as we complemented each other well. After dating for a while, Kayla invited me to their house.
You should come to my house one of these days, and I'll introduce you to my parents.
Are you sure? You mentioned they're a bit traditional, you said.
They are. But if we want this to work in the future, you'll have to meet them at some point. If not today, it'll be next week or the following month. It's inevitable.
If that's the case, I guess I better try to get my in-laws' approval as soon as possible.
You'll see it's not that bad. My parents may be a bit stubborn, but they'll adore you once they get to know you.
Unfortunately, in this case, it wasn't so. Kyla had faith in her parents, and I suppose if there's one good thing I could say about them is that they didn't throw me out of their villa immediately. But as for the rest, well, let's just say the evening didn't go quite as we imagined. Kyla's parents were polite in receiving me, but curt at the same time. They made no effort to involve me in the conversation, ignoring me as much as they could to give exclusive attention to their daughter. And the few times they addressed me, it was to respond with monosyllables or make some sharp comment about something related to them or their fortune. I could even have sworn that when Kyla wasn't paying attention, they didn't disguise their looks of disgust towards me. If the silence that ensued was uncomfortable when we arrived and spent some time watching TV, the bad vibes became even more present once we sat down for dinner.
And what did you say you do for work, Henry?
My name is Hunter, and I work as a waiter in a family restaurant, although I also paint portraits on commission.
What a dreadful thing it is to have to work in one of those places, barely making enough to avoid living under a bridge and having to slave away in a filthy kitchen for 10 or 12 hours.
My shift is only 8 hours, and if the place were as unhygienic as you say, it would be closed down by the authorities. Besides, it's a well-known chain. I'm sure you've eaten there before.
Absolutely not. How absurd to even consider going to such a place. What would people think?
Kyla, don't you think it would be better for you to get back with your ex? I don't think this boy is up to our standard. Just look at how he dresses. And worse, as a black man, there are always gangsters.
James, Kyla's ex, was a white individual from a wealthy family whom Kyla's parents had always approved of for her since they were kids. Probably, Kyla breaking up with him had been a disappointment, but they still didn't give up on the possibility that things could take an unexpected turn and that I would be out of the picture. So the old couple not only didn't accept me over time, but they started doing everything possible for me to leave this relationship. They began with hurtful comments every time I crossed paths with them in town, and will often send me direct messages with strange number threatening me to let go of Kayla. Then, seeing that neither she nor I had no intentions of breaking up, they proceeded with even more direct messages, going as far as inviting Kyla's ex to one of our family gatherings without consulting us first.
Come on, Kyla, don't tell me you don't like this surprise. How long has it been since you last saw James?
Not long enough, honestly.
Let's take advantage of me being here to go eat at the restaurant we like.
That place is a bit expensive for me.
Hunter, I know you are poor. I'll treat you all. You can have whatever you want, no limits. After all, I wouldn't want my dear Kyla and her family to go without, right? Isn't it fantastic, Kyla? Now that James is here, he surely can also treat you to the theater or one of those VIP events from the Lyceum that you love so much. Surely James is a good catch.
If he is, why didn't you marry him?
Kayla's dad was shocked the way she responded, and from there peace was shattered, and the subtle remarks became the order of the day. There seemed to be no way for Kyla and me to separate, so I imagine that's why my in-laws decided to employ even more drastic measures. 1 month after that incident, I closed from work one day, and I was cornered by a thug in the parking lot and was severely beaten, resulting in a black eye. I knew they had sent him because the individual, just before proceeding with the beating, specified it to me. If I didn't distance myself from Kyla willingly, it was going to have to be forcibly. That must have been the thought process my in-laws went through, which led them to hire this person's services. Of course, I filed a report, but my in-laws denied everything to the police, and furthermore, the guy who carried out the assault was missing. It seemed he was a professional, and therefore accustomed to quickly doing what was expected of him, and then disappearing into the darkness of the night. Anyway, I wouldn't withdraw that report. When they caught the guy, he would have to answer for his actions. Until then, it was better to lay the cards on the table with Kyla.
What if we run away?
Is that an option? I also don't want to separate you from your family. I know you care about them despite everything that's happening.
Maybe if they learned to respect my decisions, I wouldn't have suggested this. But as things stand, I don't think my parents will stop until they achieve their goal. And if they've already resorted to physical violence, what's next?
I don't think they're stupid enough to hire a hitman. But you're right that for safety reasons, it's better to put some distance between us. Kyla lied to her parents, telling them that she had already broken up with me, thus giving me an excuse and enough time to prepare our escape. A few days later, we both left for the other end of the country to start a new life together. We rented an apartment, changed jobs, and although the beginnings were tough, we soon thrived. A few weeks later, Kayla's family found out we were still together and had run away from them, so Kayla cut off communication with her relatives. Initially, they kept calling us with hundreds of threats to make us return or tell them our precise location. We never succumbed to their pleas. On the contrary, a couple of years later, we ended up getting married instead of separating. Kyla found another law firm to partner with and started making good money with it. I continued working in hospitality and doing art as a hobby until one day I was fortunate enough that some people in the audiovisual industry discovered my paintings and offered me to work with them on the set design of a movie. I didn't need the money anymore, as things were going so well. I had recently founded a small cafe in the center of my new city, but I accepted anyway, because it seemed like an exciting project. After a few months, when the movie was released, it turned out to be a resounding success. It won numerous awards internationally, and I also became known for having participated and even won in my category for Best Production Design. Money and fame poured in, and to my surprise, a few days after my success was announced, I received a call from my in-laws.
Congratulations, we always said you would do great things.
I don't remember you ever saying that.
You must not have been paying attention, as you were always so hardworking that maybe you didn't hear it. Anyway, when are you coming home? We have to celebrate this.
I don't think we'll be coming back. We're doing well here, thank you.
But you have to come back. What will become of our traditional family dinners? Plus, we have a lot to catch up on.
My in-laws didn't care that we missed hundreds of family dinners over the years when Kyla and I were not yet at their economic level, nor were we known by half the world. It was clear that their sudden interest was due to my newly achieved success. I talked about this with Kyla, and both she and I agreed that it was better to have minimal contact with her parents and stay where we were, as here we were truly happy without anyone bothering us. A few months later, I was interviewed on a national program to talk about my participation in the movie, upcoming artistic projects, and also to share something about my personal life. I didn't intend to specifically talk about what happened with my in-laws, but it happened, as I ultimately considered it important to raise awareness about how terrible it is to discriminate against someone because of their skin color, social status, or simply for being different from what is expected. I didn't mention my in-laws' names, but somehow people found out. What they had done still came to light, and they were ridiculed before the whole country, becoming hated by the community. I heard that their house was vandalized, with graffiti on the facade accusing them of being racists, and their car was stolen and burnt. And eventually, the police became more interested in them, leading to the apprehension of the criminal they had hired to assault me so many years ago. Both that individual and my in-laws faced charges for the assault, and neither their reputation nor their bank accounts were ever the same again. Later, we heard rumors that they were sent to serve 4 years in prison. During their time there, the hitman they hired coincidentally ended up in the same cell as Kayla's dad, who would often beat him up out of frustration. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.
All the cleaning is done by me. And don't you dare talk about the kitchen as if you don't march in there and eat everything you can get your grubby hands on after everyone is asleep.
I'm not doing a woman's job, and as if I'd eat your cooking. Ken, you made a massive mistake marrying this bitch.
I hit him as hard as I could. I feel bad now, looking back on it. I'm sure my kids were watching, and I think I still had some of the adrenaline from my house being on fire. But we had our fight on the front lawn, rolling around, punching each other.
Hello, my name is Sarah, and I'm a stay-at-home mother of 2. My husband Ken and I got married 4 years ago just after college. I should mention that Ken's family has always been terrible. His father died of alcoholism when he was young, and his mother, Leah, always hated me for stealing her baby boy away from her. His brother only ever calls my husband to ask for more money to support his sports gambling addiction or pay off bad debt, despite working full-time in construction. Even at our wedding, his family kept making offhand comments about my dress or how bad the food was, as if they were ready for it to be over. To say that they are a nightmare in my life is an understatement, but we only have to deal with them around the holidays. It came as no surprise when we heard that Ken's brother Sam lost his construction job and was evicted from his apartment soon after. In fact, we had expected it. Sam was always horrible with his money and spending habits. It wasn't until his mother turned up at our front door telling Ken to let him stay with us that I realized how naive I was. If only I knew then what would happen afterwards.
You're the older brother. It's your responsibility to look after your younger brother.
He's almost 35 years old. It's his own fault that he got himself into this mess.
It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's your responsibility. You have a spare couch in the living room, don't you?
Mom, I'm not having my kid's uncle crash in the living room. That's not right.
So you would rather have him sleep on the street?
That's not what I meant.
Good. I'll tell him to pack his things.
Sam was always the slob of the family, and that was saying something. I don't think he's ever owned a piece of clothing that wasn't either stained or torn. My fear of him sleeping in the living room was imagining my kids wading through the trash and tripping over stray pillows he'd leave around just to get to the kitchen. Within 2 hours of my mother-in-law appearing at our front door, he pulled up the driveway in a badly damaged and smoke-stained car that looked like it was on its last legs. She must have called him as soon as she left to tell him to drive over. It looked like he had been living out of his car for the last few days.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for letting me stay with you until I'm back on my feet. Here, can you carry this inside?
Oof, this is heavy. What's in here?
Oh, just an old comic book collection. You have space for it, don't you?
I looked at my husband, but he just shrugged. His car was packed with loose belongings, things that wouldn't even sell at a garage sale. Lots of trash mixed in with old jackets and boxes that smelled like cigarette smoke. Some of the neighbors started watching us unpack his car, and I felt embarrassed by it. I told myself that it was only for a little while and that we'd do the same for my family. We piled his stuff in the corner of the living room, agreeing to find a better place to store it in the morning. It nearly overflowed onto the floor, and I half thought about setting up the kids' safety gate around it just to contain it all. It was already almost dinner time, and I hadn't started cooking yet. Ken went upstairs to get spare pillows and blankets. I went into the kitchen to start preparing the meal, and Sam followed me in.
So, what's for dinner?
I'm just making a simple lasagna. It's the kids' favorite.
Lasagna is my favorite too. I doubt you could make it better than my mom, though.
Better than Leah? I can certainly try.
I doubt that. From what I can tell, you've never been a good cook.
Excuse me?
Here you go. A place to sleep for the night.
Ken came down with the supplies and brought Sam into the living room. I pulled Ken aside afterwards and told him what Sam had said, but he insisted I don't take it to heart. His family had always said harsh things, and they didn't mean it to be insulting. I sighed and let it go. For the first little while of him staying, I thought that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I would feel better about him staying after he showered. After all, he was my husband's brother, and it was the right thing to do. Those thoughts went out the window after dinner. I always set my lasagna on the stove to rest after I take it out of the oven, and I left the room. When I came back, over half of it was gone. There was barely enough left for me and the kids. When I asked Sam about it, he denied eating any and said it must have been the kids. It continued like that over the weekend and into next week. Food around the house would go missing, the bathroom would be left a stinking disaster, and Sam would reuse old clothes instead of doing laundry. Can you ask him how long he plans on staying for? It's already been 2 weeks, and I don't think he's applied to any jobs.
Yeah, I can do that. Is he bugging you that much?
Well, I'd certainly like my living room back. I'm afraid to even go into it when he's not there, and he stays up watching TV so late that the kids have a hard time sleeping from the noise. You already told him last week to keep it down. Also, could you tell him to stop smoking in the house? The other day I caught him napping on the sofa while holding a lit cigarette.
Good point. I'll talk to him in the morning. Hey, how's it going?
Going good. How about yourself?
Good. Listen, I need to talk to you about some stuff. How long are you planning on staying for? Have you applied to any jobs yet?
Dude, you don't have to be an asshole about it. You want me to be homeless? You think it's easy to get a job?
That's not what I said. I'm asking a simple question.
Why don't you ask your wife to get a job? Why can't she help out around here? Half the time, the kitchen isn't even cleaned properly. What does she do all day anyways?
First of all, leave her out of this. Second, you don't do anything all day either. When was the last time you left the house, besides doing a beer run? I haven't seen you move from that couch. You spend all day watching reruns and football. You need to get it together. Also, can you stop smoking in the house? It's a fire hazard. I was infuriated. I stormed away and marched upstairs, and by the time I was back in my bedroom, I already had a missed call from my mother. She yelled at me for what I said to my brother, calling me inconsiderate and cruel. I told her that it wasn't right and that I had a family to take care of. She argued back that we are your family and that your wife is just your wife. At this, I was so angry, I hung up the phone. When I went downstairs, I found Sam had already started drinking, smoking, and watching TV again, and ignored me.
I woke up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. I jumped out of bed, faster than I could wake up, and raced out the bedroom door. Already, the top floor was a haze of thick black smoke, and I started coughing. I called for Ken to wake up, and I went into my kids' rooms to wake them up. I put both on either shoulder, carrying them downstairs, covering their mouths with their pajamas. When we were outside, I put them on the lawn and turned around. The house was on fire, spreading from the kitchen to the living room and crawling up the inside of the windows. Smoke poured out from the front door. The heat and smoke made my eyes water, and I wasn't sure how I hadn't noticed it while I was still in the house. A moment later, Ken and Sam came through the front door. My kids ran up to hug my husband, and Sam looked in disbelief back at the house. Immediately, I accused him.
It wasn't me. Maybe if you had kept the kitchen in better shape and cleaned up once in a while, nothing would have set on fire.
Excuse me? Don't dare talk about the kitchen or shift blames. You most have caused this with a cigarette in your hand when you fell asleep. And as for the kitchen, you've never even offered to help with the dishes, let alone clean up after yourself. All the cleaning is done by me. And don't you dare talk about the kitchen as if you don't march in there and eat everything you can get your grubby hands on after everyone is asleep.
I'm not doing a woman's job. And as if I'd eat your cooking. Ken, you made a massive mistake marrying this bitch.
I hit him as hard as I could. I feel bad now, looking back on it. I'm sure my kids were watching, and I think I still had some of the adrenaline from my house being on fire. But we had our fight on the front lawn, rolling around, punching each other. I don't remember how long we rolled around, but it took 2 of the neighbors and a few firemen to pull us apart, so I knew it lasted until the firemen got there. After that, we gave our statements to the police, and the firefighters put out what remained of our home. The top floor was gone, including all of the kids' belongings. We got set up in a nearby hotel, without Sam, and tried to sleep away the few hours left of the early morning. I stopped responding to my mom's phone calls, and I blocked my brother soon after.
From what we're told after, the fire had been started from a lit cigarette that was left unattended. Sam apparently had lit it, and then forgotten about it and went to sleep. It had apparently fallen on garbage that he had left on the kitchen table, and had ignited. It took over pretty quickly from there. We were told that we were lucky to have made it out alive. The worst of it was smoke inhalation for Ken and Sam, which resulted in some small coughing from my husband and numerous phone calls from my mother-in-law complaining about what a horrible mother I am and what I had done to her son. Soon afterwards, we decided to go out of state and get new jobs. We didn't hear much from his family after that, and we enjoyed the peace and quiet to settle down. Obviously, we had no intention of ever contacting them again either, and we believed we could never forgive either of them for their actions and their words. However, what Sam had said to me stuck with me, and I developed insomnia. The therapist that I talked to said that it was to be expected from house fire victims and would fade with time. We knew we couldn't sue Sam for physical or emotional damages since he was bordering on bankruptcy at any moment. But we were happy enough to never speak to him again anyways. We later found out that Sam had used up the rest of his mother's savings, trying to pay off his sports gambling debts. Leah ended up having to sell her house just to make enough for retirement. It had been over a year, and now they both live together in a trailer park, and my mother-in-law and Sam have to pick up a minimum wage jobs to make ends meet. I hear they flip burgers in a tiny restaurant, while our family lives in a larger house than we had before with mountains all around. The greatest part is that we'll never have to see them again. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
Okay, you wouldn't listen to me about marrying my son. But please don't ruin his future by giving birth to a half-breed abomination. I will pay you $50,000 to have an abortion.
You cannot be serious? Why the hell would I do that? How can you say something so monstrous?
Oh, spare me your stupidity. There is no way that I will allow my bloodline to be mixed with your inferior subhuman blood. So will you take the deal or not?
Of course not. Get out of my house.
Fine then. Be a selfish bitch. Here, my wife baked you some cookies.
Hi there, my name is Susie, and let me start off by saying that this story isn't a very happy one. It all started when I met Dave. Both of us had recently graduated from college, and we were starting off with our new careers. We were excited to finally be joining the working force, and we had both chosen this cute little cafe to have lunch in. There was only one table left, and we sat down across from each other at the same time. Our eyes locked onto each other's, and we instantly fell hard for one another. Not long after that, we were dating, and within a few months, Dave introduced me to his family. I was so nervous about making a good first impression, and as it turned out, there was no way that I could have. The second I walked into the door, I noticed Dave's father smiling broadly, but the second that he saw me, his smile faded and was replaced with a scowl.
Mom and Dad, this is Susie.
Oh, well, it's nice to meet you, Susie.
It's a great pleasure to meet the two of you as well.
Well, you never told us that she was Black Dave. You should have mentioned that. Why would I? Why would that matter? Well, of course it matters. But thankfully, it's just a phase.
Neither Dave or I knew what to make of it. The whole night after that was incredibly awkward, and I was incredibly grateful when it was time to finally go home. I felt so bad, both because Dave had wanted to make a good impression, both with his parents and also with me, and I think his dad's reaction had caught him by surprise as well. However, we were madly in love, and we didn't let his father's words sway our intentions. Within 6 months, Dave proposed to me, and we began to plan our wedding. My future father-in-law didn't hide the fact that he didn't disapprove, and he on more than one occasion even tried to ask Dave to call off the wedding, but neither of us could be convinced to do so. In the end, he even tried to make a deal with me, which completely caught me off guard. One night, while Dave was out with friends, my future father-in-law came and paid me a visit.
Hey, Susie, listen. I have no interest in you joining my family.
Well, that's too damn bad because it's happening.
Maybe. Maybe not. If I were to give you $50,000 to walk away and never tell Dave why, would you?
I couldn't believe what he was saying to me. The money would be nice, of course, but Dave was the only person that I would want to share it with. So that was pretty much out of the question. No. No, I wouldn't. There isn't an amount of money that you can offer me to make me walk away from him. I truly do love him, and there isn't anything you can say or do to change that. I could tell by the look on his face that that made him furious, but he just left without saying anything more. Surprisingly, he didn't say or do anything, and our wedding came and passed. He scowled the entire day but kept his mouth shut. A year later, I thought maybe he had changed his mind about everything, but was unsure. At any rate, Dave and I found out some amazing news. I had become pregnant. It was a bit unexpected and unplanned, but both Dave and I were incredibly happy with the news. We started telling everyone the good news, but when we told Dave's parents, they had mixed opinions. His mother was happy for us, but his father just stared and was emotionless. He did not say a single word, which was even creepier and more disturbing if he had said anything cruel. I knew that he didn't like me, and all because I was Black, but for him to not say anything about me being pregnant was just plain odd. A few weeks later, I was sitting at home while Dave was out and my father-in-law came over. The visit was very unexpected, but I saw no harm in it, so I let him in the house.
Okay, you wouldn't listen to me about marrying my son. But please don't ruin his future by giving birth to a half-breed abomination. I will pay you $50,000 to have an abortion.
You cannot be serious? Why the hell would I do that? How can you say something so monstrous?
Oh, spare me your stupidity.
There is no way that I will allow my bloodline to be mixed with your inferior subhuman blood. So will you take the deal or not?
Of course not. Get out of my house.
Fine then. Be a selfish bitch. Here, my wife baked you some cookies. Not sure why she would waste the time to make you anything but here.
He just threw the tin of cookies at me and left. I was so angry that I went and took a shower in an attempt to calm down a bit. By the time I got out of the shower, I was still very angry and didn't really know what to do, so I just sat down on the couch and waited for Dave to come home so we could talk. As I sat there, I looked at the tin of cookies and grabbed them and started eating them. They tasted rather good, actually, but after I had eaten 10 of them, my stomach began to feel funny. At first, I had thought that maybe I had eaten them too quickly, but the pain only got worse and then I felt my legs were wet. Confused, I reached down and saw that there was blood on my legs. Panicking, I called for an ambulance, and when it showed up, it took me straight to the hospital. Once there, I was examined by the doctors, and they gave me the grave news that I had had a miscarriage. They tried to tell me that they were sorry for my loss and that I shouldn't blame myself. That it happens to lots of women, but I wasn't buying it. I didn't know for certain, but I was convinced that my father-in-law had something to do with what happened to me. Both Dave and I were more angry than sad, though, but I couldn't tell him what I suspected, as it would kill him to know that his own father had killed his child. And so I came up with a plan to find out the truth. I had a friend that worked in a lab, and I sent the cookies I hadn't eaten to him, and he ran some tests, and sure enough, he found out that there was a chemical in the cookies that would induce an abortion. It was true that my father-in-law had indeed drugged me and had caused me to lose my child. I was beyond furious and couldn't really figure out a way to make his father pay for what he had done. And so I asked Dave not to tell anyone what had happened yet, and that I wanted to tell people in person. He was confused, but he agreed, and so I was left to tell people when I was ready to. The next day, I went home from the hospital, and I set up a recording device and called up my father-in-law. I know what you did. You piece of shit. You tried to kill my child with those cookies laced with drugs.
I have no idea what you are talking about.
Yes, you do. But the joke is on you. The drugs didn't work. They made me have terrible cramps, but that's it. You failed, and I'm going to give birth to Dave's son, and there isn't anything you can do about it.
You think so? Well, I got news for you. I'll kill you before I let that abomination be born.
He hung up, and although I was terrified because I knew that he was probably on his way over to my house to kill me, I was so full of rage that I didn't care. I went and grabbed a baseball bat and hid near the front door to my house and waited. When I saw my father-in-law pull into the driveway in his car, I called the police and told them that a man was trying to break into my house and was threatening to kill me, and then I waited. Hidden where I was, I saw my father-in-law break into the house and slowly slip through the front door and start to walk towards the stairs that led up to the second floor where Dave and I slept. Before he could walk up the stairs, I hit him in the back of the head with the baseball bat. I hit him with such force that he almost lost consciousness, and he dropped a gun that he was carrying. Thinking quickly, I kicked the gun away and then hit him again, a second and third time. He was incredibly dazed and hurt, but he kept coming at me and threatened to kill me again. Just as he did, 2 police officers came through the open door, and I was relieved to see that they had heard him threaten me. They rushed past me and pulled out their batons and began hitting my father-in-law until he passed out. After the dust settled and my father-in-law was in handcuffs in the back of a squad car, I told the police that my father-in-law had threatened to kill me, and I played the recording I had made for them. That, coupled with them hearing him threaten me and having a loaded gun, was all they needed to hear. They took him away and he was charged with attempted murder. The trial was quick. The gun my father-in-law had in his possession had been acquired illegally and only added fuel to the fire. The judge gave him the maximum penalty, and he ended up being sentenced to over 15 years in prison. My mother-in-law filed for a divorce immediately. My father-in-law was guilty of all charges. As for Dave and I, we tried a few times to have children, and I'm happy to say that we have 2 boys and a girl, and we could not be happier. My mother-in-law always visits us and loves our kids. On all of the major holidays, we take tons of photos of us and the kids and send them to my father-in-law. We know that seeing those photos infuriates him, and knowing that makes us feel quite justified in ensuring that he is in prison where he belongs. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
I know you took my money. I already called the cops. You better hope you have a good lawyer. Give it all back now, and I'll make a plea for a lighter sentence. From now on, you are dead to us. We no longer have a son.
I found out the money Amber deposited was from my father's company. Hello, my name is John. I have a sister who was always my parents' favorite. Despite any flaws she might have had, they were often overlooked. Her name was Amber, and even though she was younger than me, she was often the cause of my punishments and made my life miserable for years. Every small thing I did, Amber used against me. She knew my parents loved her more because she was intelligent. So my parents, Amy and Charles, were always taking her side.
Mom, John's on the phone with his girlfriend. You said we weren't supposed to date till we were 18.
John, get off the phone. You know we have rules about dating.
I am not dating anyone. She's my lab partner for biology.
Yeah, right. I heard you call her babe and honey.
John, get off the phone right now, and you're grounded again.
My father often hung up the phone on me. A lot of this happened before cell phones were a thing, so my father would often just hang up the base of the phone so I couldn't use it. And I want to point out that I wasn't dating anyone. On top of all that, my father still believed in physical punishments, which was common at the time. So I tried to keep the peace between myself and my parents to avoid being hit. Surprisingly, Amber was constantly getting good grades, while I was only a mediocre student at best. Passing, but barely.
Mom, Dad, we got our report cards. Look, all A's.
Oh, good job, Amber. That's fantastic.
You did wonderful, dear.
So, John, what does your report card say? Did you get any D's this time? Or F's? I know he has it. I saw him put it in his backpack.
Although I got passing grades with C's and B's, that was never good enough. I had a hard time reading words sometimes, which I later found out was because I had dyslexia, which was never really tested for back then. As time went on, though, Amber got worse and worse. She would start taking my school lunches and throwing them away. She started rumors about me at school, like I would wet the bed, or that I was caught wearing her underwear. It got bad enough that I had a hard time making any friends, and would often eat alone in the bathroom. When she wasn't punished for it at school, she pushed her limits at home too.
Dad, John was trying to peek at me in the shower.
No, I didn't. I wasn't even on the second floor.
John, get your ass over here now. That's crossing the line.
I won't ever forget that day. It was the turning point for me and my family. My parents never even considered that she might be lying and wouldn't listen to my side of the story at all. And Amber knew, then and there, that everything was fair game to her. She was untouchable. From then on, I started staying late after school, doing extracurricular activities, like track and cross-country, joining whatever club would run late into the night, and had other people so Amber couldn't outright lie where I was at.
I saw John drinking down by the river.
Call Ms. Smith, I was with the public speaking club again.
Be careful, John. As before, I will be calling to check. I know you're bound to slip up sometime.
Although my grades were mediocre, all my after-school activities helped me get into an okay college. I was happy to be out of the house. Amber was able to get into a great school across the country. The only time we saw each other was during the first Christmas break. Hi, Mom and Dad, how are you all doing?
Are you doing good in school? Don't ask for any money. You're old enough to be taking care of yourself like a man.
Hi, Mom and Dad. I got more A's. College isn't as hard as I thought it would be.
And we are so proud of you, Amber. Good job. How about you, John? Are you getting good grades too?
The same as high school, but slightly more B's.
Oh, are you cheating in college too then?
I never cheated in high school.
John, if you get caught cheating, they will kick you out. And don't expect to come back here. I won't have my disgraced son living with me. That would be an embarrassment.
So, Amber, how did your trip to the beach go last week?
Another thing I realized, both my parents were constantly checking in on Amber, calling her to see how she was doing and what she was up to. They never called me once. I made it partway through Christmas break before deciding that I would just spend the rest of it on campus instead. I told my parents that I had a major project due and that my partners and I got permission to use the lab during the break so we'd have more time to test some experiments. It wasn't true. We'd already finished before the break, but no one batted an eye at my story. Amber made a rude comment that we were probably way behind and were trying to play catch-up, and my father commented that it was rude to make the teachers work on their break, especially for a student who was most likely going to fail anyway.
Goodbye, John.
Bye, Mom. I better not get any calls from the school, John. Keep your nose clean. Got it? After that, I decided not to go back home ever again. I stayed at school during summer break, taking a few additional classes. I was able to graduate very early because of that. My grades weren't anything special, but because I did 4 years of school within 2 years, I got a few interviews lined up fairly easily and was able to convince them that I was indeed a hard worker. My starting pay was decent, and as time went on, I started making good money. During those years, I never once got a call or anything. That is until I got one from Amber a few years later. As soon as I heard her voice, I suddenly got the urge to record the call as I had no idea what she was going to say. For all I knew, she could accuse me of something crazy, and I wanted to protect myself.
Hello, John. I wanted to apologize for everything I did to you growing up.
Really?
I didn't realize how much of a shit I was to you till recently. I just wanted to call and say I am sorry, and that I don't blame you for hating me.
I appreciate the call and apology, Amber, but I am not sure how I feel about this.
I don't blame you at all. Please take your time. I am going to give you space, but I want to call again in the future. Will that be okay?
Sure, Amber, that'd be fine. I was dumbfounded. I never expected her to call and apologize. I wasn't sure what to make of it, and for the rest of the week, I was confused. She did call again about a week or two later, again friendly and nice. After that, we continued to talk off and on over the next month, maybe once every 2 weeks. Not a lot, but those conversations were the nicest I have ever had with her. Until one day.
Hey John, I need some help with something. You see, my boss wants to give me a bonus, but since our father keeps tabs on my account, I don't want him to know how much I am getting. It's a large bonus.
Why is Dad keeping tabs on your account?
He gives me money sometimes. Me being immature. Misspent enough that he wouldn't lend any more unless he had access. But now that I am making good money, he only checks to ensure I have enough to eat and for rent. Sorry, I know he doesn't do the same for you.
So why keep the bonus a secret?
Because I want to get them a large gift and want it to be a surprise. Plus, I'll be leaving some of it in your account to help make up for the hell I put you through.
I never should have trusted her. I gave her my bank information. By the end of the week, she had deposited an unfathomable amount of money into my account. As I had done several times before, I had recorded the call, but unlike the previous times, I felt no guilt about doing so this time. Something about it felt odd. A day or so later, I got a call. I know you took my money. I already called the cops. You better hope you have a good lawyer. Give it all back now, and I'll make a plea for a lighter sentence. From now on, you are dead to us. We no longer have a son. I found out the money Amber deposited was from my father's company. I checked my account and the money was gone. Amber didn't answer any of my calls. Worried, I contacted a lawyer. He was new but offered a good discount, something my salary could afford in payments. After working with a detective and a private investigator, it was found that Amber had been in deep debt for many years, often getting money from our father to help cover most of what she owed. When my dad started noticing money disappearing from his account and became suspicious, Amber used me to divert the attention. She tried to frame me by putting that money into my account, but I wasn't even in the same city where the transfer happened, and there were cameras at the bank. That, on top of my recording of her saying that she was going to put the money into my account, helped to protect me. It was clear-cut that she was using me. The account she moved it to was easily tracked as well, so getting the money back wasn't that hard since Amber wasn't a criminal mastermind. Armed with all that evidence, I went to my parents and the police and gave it to them both. It didn't take long for them to catch her and arrest her for embezzling money and fraud. Before the trial, though, my parents approached me. Look, son, you don't have to testify against her. You know she was only trying to pay off her debts. She was embarrassed about them. And I got my money back, but it's all going to her greedy lawyer who's saying the amount she took was so large that she's looking at a long time in prison for this. You wouldn't want that, would you?
Yeah, John. Please just be reasonable and let's just forget all about this. There's no sense in punishing her more than she has already been.
I am sorry. Who is this? As far as I am aware, I have no parents. In the end, my father lost his company. He had to sell it for pennies on the dollar just to make up for what my sister's lawyer was charging them. He put up a second mortgage on their home as well in a last-ditch effort to save his business and daughter. But in the end, it foreclosed. They tried once to see if they could live with me, but I told them that would be an embarrassment for me. Amber got convicted. Her debts, theft,
fraud and tax evasions meant she had to serve time and now had a record. She's still serving and was up for parole last I heard but was denied. Despite that, when she does get out, she won't be able to go back to our mom or dad because they still don't have a place to live and have been staying with other relatives in a cramped one-bedroom place. Plus, she'll always have a record now. As much as they needed me in the end, they didn't deserve my help and will never get it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more stories.